The blood-red sunset cast long shadows across the canyon walls as Violet Zimmerman clutched her empty canteen, desperation clawing at her throat like the relentless desert thirst. 3 days lost in the labyrinthine network of Colorado's canyons had stripped away her city confidence, leaving nothing but raw survival instinct and fading hope. It was 1878, and Violet had never imagined her journey west would lead her here parched, disoriented, and utterly alone. At 24, she had left Philadelphia with dreams of establishing her own photography business in the frontier town of Salida. Now she wondered if she would live long enough to see another sunrise. The sound of loose stones scattering down the rocky incline made her freeze. Mountain lion. Bandit either meant certain death. She pressed herself against the canyon wall, her dusty traveling dress blending with the weathered stone. The clip-clop of hooves echoed through the ravine, followed by a low whistle that could only be human. "Who's there?" Violet called out, her voice barely a rasp. Silence answered her. Then came the clear sound of a rifle being cocked. "Show yourself," commanded a deep, graveled voice. Slowly now, Violet stepped away from the wall, raising her trembling hands. "I'm unarmed, I'm lost." From around the bend emerged a tall figure on horseback, backlit by the dying sun. The man dismounted with practiced ease, though Violet noticed a slight stiffness in his movement. He kept the rifle trained on her as he approached, his face shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat. 3 days from the nearest trail and you're just lost." The man's disbelief was evident in his tone. "Nobody comes this deep into Whitewood Canyon without a reason." "I was photographing rock formations," Violet explained, pointing to the camera case strapped across her body. "My horse spooked at her rattlesnake, threw me and bolted with most of my supplies." The man studied her for a long moment, then lowered his rifle. In the fading light, Violet could finally see his face weathered and tanned, with a scar running from his right temple to his jaw. His eyes were the piercing blue of a winter sky, set in a face that hadn't known a proper shave in weeks. He was older than her by perhaps 10 years, his dark hair streaked with premature silver at the temples. "Isaac Blackburn," he said finally, offering no hand to shake. "Most folks call me Ike." "Violet Zimmerman." She swayed slightly, lightheadedness making the canyon walls swim before her eyes. Isaac moved with surprising speed, catching her elbow before she crumpled to the ground. "When did you last drink water, Miss Zimmerman?" "Yesterday morning," she admitted. "I found a small spring, but it's gone dry since." Without comment, he uncorked his own canteen and passed it to her. "Small sips," he instructed. "Too much too fast will make you sick." The water was warm but tasted sweeter than any fine wine Violet had ever sampled in Philadelphia. She forced herself to drink slowly, watching Isaac over the rim of the canteen. He moved with the wariness of a man accustomed to solitude, keeping a careful distance between them even as he offered aid. "Thank you," she said, returning the canteen. "I don't suppose you could point me in the direction of Salida. I have lodging arranged there." A humorless smile creased his face. "Salida's 4 days' ride, and that's if you know these canyons, which you clearly don't." He glanced at the darkening sky. "Night's coming. You won't make it a mile before the temperature drops or the mountain lions start hunting." Fear clutched at Violet's heart. "What am I to do then?" Isaac seemed to wage some internal battle before sighing heavily. "I've got a cabin, half-day's ride from here. You can rest up, get your bearings. Then I'll point you toward town." It wasn't a generous offer, his reluctance was palpable, but Violet had no choice. Death awaited her in these canyons without his help. "I'd be most grateful, Mr. Blackburn," he grunted in response, leading his horse closer. "Can you ride?" "Yes." "Good. You'll ride double with me until we reach my place." He mounted first, then extended his hand down to her. Violet hesitated only momentarily before grasping it, surprised by the strength with which he pulled her up behind him. "Hold on," was his only warning before spurring the horse forward. Violet had no choice but to wrap her arms around his waist as they set off through the gathering dusk. She felt the tension in his body at her touch, a man clearly unaccustomed to human contact. But as they navigated the treacherous canyon paths, his expertise was undeniable. He guided the horse with subtle movements, anticipating drops and narrow passes before Violet even saw them. The night grew cold quickly, and despite her exhaustion, Violet remained awake, afraid to loosen her grip. Isaac said nothing for hours, the silence broken only by the steady rhythm of hoofbeats and the occasional cry of a night bird. "Were you traveling alone?" he finally asked, his voice startling after such prolonged silence. "Yes. I joined a wagon train from Kansas City to Pueblo, then hired a guide to take me to Salida. He left me at the canyon entrance, said the path was straightforward from there." She felt Isaac's body stiffen beneath her hands. Name of this guide, Harlan Tucker. Isaac spat into the darkness. "Tucker's been pulling that trick for years. Takes payment to guide folks all the way to their destination, then abandons them partway, claiming the route is simple. Most end up lost or worse. You know him, I know of him. Man's responsible for at least 3 deaths I know about." There was a dangerous edge to Isaac's voice that made Violet shiver. "Sheriff in Salida won't do anything. Tucker brings too much business to the saloons." They lapsed into silence again. The moon rose higher, illuminating the path with silver light. Violet found herself studying the back of Isaac's neck, where his dark hair curled slightly above his collar. Despite his gruff manner, he had saved her life, a debt she couldn't easily repay. "There," Isaac said suddenly, pointing toward a dark shape nestled against the canyon wall ahead. "Home, sweet home." As they drew closer, Violet made out the silhouette of a small but sturdy cabin. A corral stood off to one side, currently empty save for a chestnut mare that nickered at their approach. The cabin itself showed no welcoming light, no sign of habitation beyond its mere existence in this desolate place. Isaac dismounted first, then helped Violet down. Her legs nearly buckled after the long ride, and she steadied herself against the horse while Isaac secured the animal. "It's not much," he said, leading her toward the cabin, "but it keeps the weather out." He struck a match to light a lantern just inside the door, illuminating a sparse but tidy interior. A stone fireplace dominated one wall with a small table and 2 chairs set before it. A narrow bed occupied the corner, its blankets neatly folded. Shelves lined another wall, holding books, tins, and various supplies. The cabin smelled of wood smoke and coffee. "You can take the bed," Isaac said, moving to kindle a fire. "I'll sleep on the floor." "I couldn't possibly." "You can and you will," he interrupted, not unkindly. "You're half dead from exposure as it is." Too exhausted to argue, Violet sank onto one of the wooden chairs. "May I ask what you do out here, Mr. Blackburn? It seems a terribly isolated existence." Isaac's hands paused in their work of arranging kindling. "I trap in winter, hunt, do some prospecting when the mood takes me." He struck another match, touching it to the kindling. "And I prefer the isolation. No family," the look he gave her would have withered flowers. "None living." Violet recognized the wall he'd erected and didn't press further. She watched as he moved about the cabin with practiced efficiency, putting coffee on to boil and setting out hardtack and jerky on a tin plate. "It's not much for dinner," he said, placing the plate before her. "But it'll keep you going until morning. Thank you for all of this." Violet gestured around the cabin. "I would have died out there without your help." Isaac merely nodded, pouring coffee into 2 chipped mugs. Most people would have. These canyons don't forgive mistakes. As they ate in silence, Violet studied her reluctant host more carefully. In the lantern light, she could see that the scar on his face was old, well-healed. His hands bore the calluses of hard work, and a faded blue bandana was knotted around his neck. Despite his obvious desire for solitude, there was nothing threatening about him, just a bone-deep weariness that seemed to have settled into his very posture. "Have you lived here long?" she asked when the silence grew too heavy. 5 years. He sipped his coffee. "Before that, I worked cattle drives out of Texas. And before that," his gaze sharpened. "You ask a lot of questions, Miss Zimmerman." "I'm a photographer," she replied with a small smile. "Curiosity is an occupational necessity." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his features. "Well, I'm not much for having my picture taken or my story told." He stood, taking his mug to the small basin in the corner. "You should rest. We'll leave at first light. I'll take you as far as Wolf Creek Pass. From there, it's a straight shot to Salida." "That's very kind of you." "It's not kindness," Isaac said flatly. It's making sure you don't end up dead in my canyon. Despite his brusque manner, Violet found herself strangely comforted by Isaac's presence as she settled onto the narrow bed. His actions spoke of a decency his words tried to deny. Outside, the wind whispered through the canyon, a lonely sound that made her pull the rough blanket tighter around herself. She watched through half-closed eyes as Isaac made his bed on the floor, spreading a bedroll with the ease of long practice. He moved the rifle to lie within easy reach before extinguishing the lantern. In the darkness, with only the glow of embers from the fireplace, Violet heard him sigh, a sound of such profound weariness that it made her heart ache. Whatever had driven Isaac Blackburn to this solitary existence had left wounds far deeper than the scar on his face. "Good night, Mr. Blackburn," she whispered. A long silence followed before his reply came, soft and unexpected. "Good night, Miss Zimmerman." Dawn arrived with pale fingers of light creeping through the cabin's single window. Violet woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of movement. Isaac was already up, cooking something over the rekindled fire. "You're awake," he observed, not turning around. "There's water in the basin if you want to wash up." Violet rose, smoothing her rumpled dress as best she could. She felt marginally better after a night's rest, though every muscle protested from the previous day's ride. At the basin, she splashed cold water on her face and attempted to bring order to her tangled auburn hair. "I hope you like venison," Isaac said, sliding a portion of meat onto a tin plate. "Smoked it last month. It smells wonderful." Violet accepted the plate gratefully. "Did you sleep well?" "Well enough." They ate in companionable silence, the awkwardness of the previous night somewhat diminished. Through the window, Violet could see that Isaac's cabin was positioned with a commanding view of the canyon below. Strategic, she realized. No one could approach without being seen. "I should check your photography equipment," Isaac said suddenly. "If anything's damaged, I might be able to repair it before we leave." Surprised by the offer, Violet handed over her leather case. Isaac opened it with unexpected gentleness, examining the camera and plates with knowledge that suggested familiarity. "You know about photography?" she asked. A shadow crossed his face. "A little. My brother was a photographer during the war." It was the first personal information he'd volunteered, and Violet sensed the significance. "Was he with Brady, documenting the battlefields?" Isaac nodded once. "Everything looks intact," he said, returning the case and clearly changing the subject. "You're fortunate. This equipment isn't cheap." "It represents my entire future," Violet admitted. "I intend to open a portrait studio in Salida." "There's no photographer within 50 miles, according to my research." "Bold move for a woman alone," Isaac commented, though there was no condescension in his tone, merely observation. "I've been alone for some time now," Violet replied, thinking of the empty Philadelphia house she'd left behind. "My parents died of influenza 2 years ago. There was nothing keeping me east." Isaac nodded as if he understood perfectly. "We should get moving if we want to make good time," he said, rising to clear away their breakfast things. "The pass can be tricky this time of year." Within the hour, they had saddled both horses, Isaac insisting that Violet take his gentler mare, while he rode the more spirited gelding he'd had the previous day. He secured minimal supplies and his rifle before leading them away from the cabin. The path he chose wound through the canyon in a way that wouldn't have been obvious to Violet's untrained eye. They rode side by side where the trail allowed, and in single file where it narrowed. The beauty of the landscape was breathtaking in the morning light, red rock formations reaching toward the endless blue sky, scrubby juniper clinging tenaciously to seemingly barren ground. "How did you come to know these canyons so well?" Violet asked as they navigated a particularly spectacular stretch. Isaac was quiet so long that she thought he might not answer. "After the war, I couldn't abide crowds, or noise, or much of anything, really." His voice was measured, as if carefully selecting each word. "I drifted west. Kept finding places too populated for my liking. These canyons, they don't judge, they don't ask questions, they just are. And they're beautiful," Violet added softly. He glanced at her, surprise evident in his expression. "Most folks just see danger or obstacles." "I see both," she admitted. The danger and the beauty. Sometimes they're inseparable. Something shifted in Isaac's gaze, a momentary connection, quickly shuttered. He turned his attention back to the trail, but the rigid set of his shoulders had relaxed slightly. They stopped to rest the horses at midday, sharing jerky and dried apples in the shade of an overhanging rock. The heat had intensified, making the air shimmer above the distant ridges. "May I ask you something, Mr. Blackburn?" He gave her a wary look. "You can ask. Why did you help me?" Violet met his gaze directly. "You clearly value your solitude. Taking in a stranded stranger seems out of character." Isaac looked away, focusing on the horizon. "There are wolves in these hills, Miss Zimmerman, and mountain lions, but the worst predators walk on two legs." His jaw tightened. "No decent man leaves a woman alone to face that. So it was decency. Don't make me out to be some kind of hero," he said sharply. "I'm not." "I don't believe heroes exist, Mr. Blackburn," Violet replied calmly. "Just people who make choices some better than others." He studied her with those intense blue eyes. "You have unusual notions for a lady photographer. Perhaps that's why I became a photographer in the first place." She smiled slightly. "To capture the world as it truly is, not as others pretend it to be." For the first time, Violet saw the ghost of a genuine smile cross Isaac's face. It transformed him, softening the hard lines around his eyes and making him appear years younger. "We should continue," he said, standing and brushing dust from his pants. "Still a good distance to the pass." As they rode through the afternoon, Isaac began pointing out landmarks and trails, explaining which were safe and which led to dead ends or dangerous terrain. Violet realized he was teaching her to navigate, ensuring she wouldn't become lost again. "That ridge there," he said, pointing to a distinctive formation, "looks like a sleeping bear from this angle. If you can see it, you're on the right path to reach the main trail." "The sleeping bear," Violet repeated, committing it to memory, "and that split rock formation to the east leads to a box canyon. No way out except the way you came in. Good place to get trapped by bandits or a storm." They continued this way, with Isaac sharing knowledge accumulated through years of solitary exploration. Violet absorbed it all, asking intelligent questions that seemed to surprise and occasionally impress him. By late afternoon, dark clouds had begun gathering over the distant mountains, and Isaac frowned at the sky. "Storm's coming faster than I expected," he said. "We won't make the pass before it hits." Violet followed his gaze to the threatening clouds. "What should we do?" "There's a line shack about an hour from here, used by cattlemen during drives but abandoned this time of year. We can shelter there until the storm passes." They pushed the horses harder, racing against the approaching weather. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and electricity. They reached the line shack just as the first fat droplets began to fall, a humble structure of rough-hewn logs with a sagging porch and single room within. Isaac quickly stabled the horses in the attached lean-to while Violet gathered kindling for a fire. By the time they were both inside, rain was hammering the roof and lightning split the darkened sky. "Quite a storm," Violet commented, trying to mask her nervousness as thunder boomed overhead. The shack's interior was dusty but sound, with a small fireplace, a rickety table, and a pair of crude bunks built into the wall. Isaac knelt to light the fire, his movements efficient. Spring storms in these mountains can turn deadly quick. Flash floods, lightning strikes. "We're safer here than trying to cross open ground." The fire caught, casting flickering light across the small space. Outside, the storm raged, but within the shack, a strange intimacy developed, two strangers thrown together by circumstance, sharing the most basic of human comforts. Warmth, shelter, safety. Violet removed her damp jacket, draping it near the fire to dry. Isaac did the same with his coat, revealing a faded blue shirt that had seen better days. When he rolled up his sleeves to check their provisions, Violet noticed a puckered scar on his left forearm, the distinctive mark of a bullet wound. "You fought in the war," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. Isaac stiffened, then nodded once. "Union cavalry, saw action at Gettysburg, the Wilderness, Petersburg. My father was too old to serve, but my uncle died at Antietam. I'm sorry." The words seemed inadequate, but Isaac's tone conveyed genuine regret. "Too many good men never came home." And some came home changed, Violet added softly. His eyes met hers, recognition flashing between them. She understood something fundamental about him without his having to explain. The moment stretched, charged with unspoken understanding. Isaac broke the connection first, turning to unpack what little food they had. Storm might last all night. We should eat sparingly. They shared a simple meal of jerky hardtack and the last of the dried apples. The rain continued unabated, occasionally driven sideways by gusts of wind that found every crack in the cabin's walls. You mentioned a brother who was a photographer, Violet said as they huddled near the fire. Is he still in the profession? Isaac's expression darkened. He died. Yellow fever, 73. I'm sorry, Violet said, echoing his earlier sentiment. Were you close, twins? Isaac replied, his voice rough. Daniel was the better half of us, thoughtful, creative, always seeing beauty where I saw only practicalities. That explains your familiarity with my equipment. Isaac nodded, poking at the fire. He taught me a bit, thought I had an eye for composition, though I never had his patience for the technical aspects. Did he leave you any of his photographs? A long pause. A few, I keep them at the cabin. Violet sensed there was more to the story but didn't press. Instead, she asked, what did he photograph besides the war? Landscapes, mostly. He had dreams of documenting the West, the real West, not the romanticized version Eastern publications preferred. A trace of pride crept into Isaac's voice. He believed photographs could tell truths that words often obscured. I believe that too, Violet said earnestly. It's why I chose this profession, despite the obstacles faced by women in the field. A photograph captures reality in a way nothing else can. Isaac studied her with renewed interest. What will you photograph in Salida? Just portraits? Portraits will pay the bills, she acknowledged. But I hope to document the town, the surrounding landscape, the people who are shaping this new frontier. Not just the wealthy businessmen, but the ordinary folk ranchers, miners, homesteaders. Ambitious, necessary, Violet countered. 50 years from now, people will want to know how it truly was, not some embellished tale from dime novels. A particularly violent gust rattled the shack's door, making them both glance up. The storm showed no signs of abating, thunder still rolling through the mountains like distant artillery. You should try to get some rest, Isaac said, nodding toward one of the bunks. I'll keep the fire going. And where will you sleep? I'll manage with the other bunk. Used to worse conditions during the war. Violet hesitated, then moved to the narrow bed. The thin mattress was musty but not uncomfortable, and she was exhausted from the day's ride. Still, she found herself watching Isaac as he fed another log to the fire, his profile strong in the flickering light. Mr. Blackburn, he looked up. Thank you again for everything. Something vulnerable crossed his features before he masked it. Get some sleep, Miss Zimmerman. Tomorrow will be a long day. Despite her fatigue, Violet's sleep was fitful, punctuated by dreams of being lost in endless canyons while a faceless figure watched from distant ridges. She woke before dawn to find the storm had passed, leaving behind a preternatural stillness. Isaac was already awake, or perhaps had never slept, sitting by the dying fire with a distant look in his eyes. Morning, he said when he noticed her stirring. Storm's past. We can head out as soon as there's light enough to see the trail. They prepared quickly, sharing the last of their provisions before saddling the horses. The world outside the line shack was transformed, washed clean by the rain, with puddles reflecting the gradually brightening sky. The air smelled of wet earth and sage. The pass should be clear, Isaac said as they mounted up. We'll need to watch for washouts, but the main danger has passed. They rode in companionable silence as the sun crested the eastern ridges, bathing the landscape in golden light. Violet found herself stealing glances at her taciturn companion, noticing how the morning sun softened his weathered features. In another life, he might have smiled more easily, laughed without reservation. The thought made her inexplicably sad. By mid-morning, they reached Wolf Creek, past a natural gap in the mountain range that offered passage toward Salida. Isaac reined in at the summit, gesturing to the panoramic view below. There's your path, he said, pointing to a winding trail that eventually joined a more established road in the distance. Follow it northeast and you'll reach Salida by nightfall. Violet surveyed the route, then turned to him with sudden reluctance. You're not coming further. This is where we part ways, Miss Zimmerman. His tone was final, though something flickered in his eyes that belied his certainty. The town ahead isn't a place I visit often. Because you prefer isolation, or is there another reason? Isaac's jaw tightened. Both. Violet hesitated, then reached into her saddlebag, withdrawing her camera. Would you allow me to take your photograph, Mr. Blackburn, as a way to remember the man who saved my life? He stiffened, clearly uncomfortable. I don't think, please, she interrupted gently. It would mean a great deal to me. After a long moment, Isaac gave a single reluctant nod. Violet quickly set up the camera on a flat rock, preparing a plate with practiced efficiency. Just look natural, she instructed, ducking beneath the black cloth to compose the shot. Through the lens, she studied him tall and straight-backed on his horse, mountains rising majestically behind him, his expression guarded but honest. A man formed by hardship yet not broken by it. She captured the image with a quiet click. Thank you, she said, carefully storing the exposed plate. Isaac dismounted to help her pack away the equipment. When their hands brushed, Violet felt an unexpected jolt of awareness that made her breath catch. Their eyes met, and for one suspended moment, the connection between them seemed to transcend their brief acquaintance. You should go, Isaac said hoarsely, stepping back. Daylight's wasting. Violet mounted her horse, an inexplicable sadness settling in her chest. If you ever find yourself in Salida, Mr. Blackburn, my studio will be on Front Street. I would welcome the chance to repay your kindness. Safe journey, Miss Zimmerman. His voice was gruff, his expression unreadable. With a final nod, Violet turned her horse toward the trail and began her descent, feeling Isaac's gaze following her long after the bend in the path should have hidden her from view. The journey to Salida passed without incident, the trail clear enough that even Violet's limited experience was sufficient to follow it. By late afternoon, she caught her first glimpse of the frontier town, nestled in the valley below a collection of wooden buildings and dirt streets centered around a main thoroughfare. As she approached, weariness and a strange melancholy settled over her. She had survived her ordeal in the canyons, yet the prospect of beginning her new life in this unfamiliar place suddenly seemed daunting. The thought of Isaac Blackburn returning alone to his isolated cabin weighed on her mind more heavily than it should for someone she'd known barely 2 days. Salida proved to be exactly as described in her correspondence, a bustling town of approximately 2,000 souls, with businesses ranging from the essential general store, livery, hotel, to the predictable vices, 3 saloons and a gaming hall. Violet made her way to the Salida House, a modest hotel where she had reserved accommodations. The clerk's eyes widened at her disheveled appearance. Miss Zimmerman, we were beginning to worry. Your room's been ready for 3 days now. I was delayed in the canyons, she explained, too exhausted to elaborate. Is the room still available? Of course, madam. And the storefront you inquired about is still being held as well. Mr. Patterson said to tell you he can meet tomorrow to discuss terms. Relief washed over her. At least this part of her plan remained intact. Thank you. I'd like to rest now, if I may. The room was simple but clean, a vast improvement over the lined shack, though Violet found herself oddly missing the warmth of Isaac's fire and his quiet, steady presence. She bathed, changed into fresh clothes, and lay down, expecting to fall asleep immediately. Instead, she found herself staring at the ceiling, replaying her time with the reclusive cowboy. There had been moments, brief, unguarded instants when something had passed between them. A recognition, perhaps. 2 souls who understood loss, who valued honesty above pleasantries. Morning brought renewed purpose. Violet dressed carefully in her best traveling suit and made her way to the address Mr. Patterson had provided. The storefront was perfectly situated on Front Street, large windows for display, ample space within for a reception area and portrait studio, with a small apartment in the rear that would serve as her living quarters. Terms are as we discussed by post, the elderly Mr. Patterson explained as they toured the space. $50 per month, with the first 3 months due upon signing. Property needs some work, but the structure's sound. It's perfect, Violet said, already envisioning how she would arrange her equipment. I'll take it. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Violet threw herself into establishing her business, cleaning and renovating the storefront, ordering supplies from Denver, introducing herself to prominent townspeople. She placed advertisements in the local newspaper and distributed calling cards to businesses throughout Salida. On May 15, 1878, VZ. Photographic Studio officially opened its doors. Curiosity alone brought her first customers, local merchants and their wives, curious about the lady photographer from Philadelphia. Violet's skill and professional demeanor quickly won them over, and soon she had a steady stream of clients requesting portraits. Yet, despite her growing success, Violet found her thoughts returning often to the canyons and to Isaac Blackburn. Each time the studio door opened, some small part of her hoped to see his tall figure and watchful blue eyes. Each time, she was disappointed. One evening in early June, as Violet was closing the studio after a busy day, the sheriff appeared at her door. Sheriff Miller was a portly man with a perpetually red face and small, calculating eyes that never quite met hers directly. "Evening, Miss Zimmerman. Got a moment to talk, of course, Sheriff. Please come in." She gestured to a chair in the reception area. "How can I help you?" Miller settled his bulk into the chair, removing his hat. "Understand you had some trouble getting to town, got lost in the canyons." Violet tensed slightly. "That's correct. I was fortunate to be found by a Mr. Blackburn who guided me safely to Wolf Creek Pass." Isaac Blackburn. The sheriff's expression darkened. "That's what I heard, wanted to confirm it myself." "Is there some problem?" Miller studied her as if assessing how much to say. "Blackburn's known to us, keeps to himself mostly, which is fine by me, but he's had disagreements with some of the more prominent citizens hereabouts." "What sort of disagreements?" Violet kept her tone neutral, though uneasiness crept up her spine. "Nothing that need concern a lady," Miller evaded. "Just wanted to advise you that associating with Blackburn might not be wise for someone looking to establish a respectable business in Salida." Indignation flared within her. "Sheriff Miller, Mr. Blackburn saved my life at considerable inconvenience to himself. I found him to be honorable and decent, if somewhat reserved." Miller's lips thinned. "Just offering friendly advice, Miss Zimmerman. Town like this, reputations matter." He stood, settling his hat back on his head. "Good evening to you." After he left, Violet locked the door with trembling hands, disturbed by the encounter. The sheriff's warning had been vague but unmistakable. Isaac Blackburn was not in favor with Salida's power structure, and by extension, neither would she be if she maintained any connection to him. The question was why? What had transpired between Isaac and the town to create such animosity? More importantly, why did the possibility of never seeing him again leave her feeling so bereft? The answer to the first question came the following afternoon, when Harlan Tucker, the guide who had abandoned Violet at the canyon entrance, sauntered into her studio. He was a broad-shouldered man with an ingratiating smile that never reached his cold eyes. "Well now, if it isn't the lady photographer," he drawled, removing his hat with exaggerated courtesy. "Pleased to see you made it to town after all." Violet's blood ran cold, but she maintained her professional composure. "Mr. Tucker, what brings you to my studio?" "Thought I might have my likeness taken," he said, grinning, "for posterity. I'm afraid my schedule is quite full. Perhaps another establishment would be better suited to your needs." Tucker's smile vanished. "Now that's not neighborly, Miss Zimmerman. Especially considering I hear you've been spreading tales about me, saying I abandoned you, left you to die in them canyons." "I've said nothing of the sort," Violet replied evenly, "though it happens to be the truth." "Your word against mine," Tucker sneered, "and I got friends in this town." "Important friends. Is that a threat, Mr. Tucker?" He stepped closer, invading her space. "Call it friendly advice, same as what Sheriff Miller likely gave you about Blackburn." His eyes narrowed. "That hermit has a habit of sticking his nose where it don't belong. 3 years back, he caught me and some associates conducting private business in the canyons." "What kind of business?" Violet asked, though she suspected the answer. "The profitable kind," Tucker said with a cold smile. We escort certain merchandise across the border from Mexico. Items that carry heavy taxes if brought through official channels. Smuggling, such an ugly word. He shrugged. Blackburn took exception to our enterprise, particularly when one of our Mexican associates got a bit rough with a señorita who saw too much. Your hermit hero put 2 bullets in my partner and threatened to do the same to me if he caught me in his canyons again. Violet felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. So you're not just a swindler who abandons travelers, you're a smuggler and worse. Tucker's face darkened with anger. Careful, lady, Blackburn ain't here to protect you now. You'd be wise to forget you ever met him and mind your own affairs. He jammed his hat back on his head. Shame if something was to happen to your nice new business. Fires are common in these wooden buildings. With that parting threat, he stormed out, leaving Violet shaken but determined. Now she understood Isaac's isolation wasn't just personal preference, but a deliberate separation from a town complicit in Tucker's illegal activities. The sheriff's warning took on new, sinister meaning. That night, Violet made a decision. She would not be intimidated. And she would find a way to warn Isaac that Tucker might seek revenge for her escape from the canyons. The opportunity came sooner than expected. The following morning, a young boy delivered a crate to her studio photographic supplies she had ordered from Denver. With the delivery came an unexpected note. Wagon leaving for Whitewood Canyon tomorrow at dawn. Supplies for mining camp. Driver willing to carry passenger or message for reasonable fee. Inquiry at livery if interested. J. Martinez. Violet didn't know who J. Martinez was, but the timing seemed too perfect to be coincidence. After closing the studio early, she packed a small bag with essentials and her camera equipment. She wrote a sign for her door. Studio closed for field photography, reopening June 10th. Dawn found her at the livery, where an elderly Mexican man was loading the last supplies onto a sturdy wagon. "Señor Martinez," she inquired. The man nodded, studying her with shrewd eyes. "You are the photographer, the one who was lost." "Yes, how did you word travels?" He gestured to the wagon. "You wish to go to the canyon." "I need to warn Mr. Blackburn about Harlan Tucker. Tucker threatened me yesterday, and I fear he may seek revenge against Mr. Blackburn as well." Martinez nodded gravely. "Isaac is a good man. He saved my granddaughter from Tucker and his men 3 years ago. The debt is not forgotten." He helped Violet onto the wagon seat. "I take supplies to the mining camp monthly. Sometimes I bring things Isaac needs. Tucker and his men avoid me too many witnesses at the camp." The journey took most of the day, following a route different from the one Violet had originally attempted. Martinez proved to be a careful driver and unexpectedly good company, sharing stories of the region's history and pointing out landmarks along the way. "There," he said late in the afternoon, indicating a barely visible trail branching from their path. "That leads to Isaac's cabin, about 2 miles. I cannot take the wagon trail too narrow, but I can wait here until sunset." "Thank you." Violet gathered her small bag. "If I'm not back by sunset, please don't worry. It will mean I'm staying at the cabin." Martinez's weathered face creased in a knowing smile. "The heart finds its way, even in the wilderness. Be careful, señorita." The trail was as challenging as Martinez had suggested, winding through dense underbrush before opening into the now familiar canyon where Isaac's cabin stood. As Violet approached, apprehension tightened her chest. What if he resented her intrusion? What if he turned her away? The cabin appeared deserted when she first glimpsed it, but as she drew closer, she saw Isaac emerge from the small corral, leading his gelding. He froze when he spotted her, disbelief evident in his posture. "Miss Zimmerman." He sounded genuinely shocked, dropping the horse's lead rope and striding toward her. "What in God's name are you doing here? Are you in trouble?" Violet was unprepared for the rush of emotion that swept through her at seeing him again. He looked the same, perhaps a bit more kempt, his beard trimmed closer, but his eyes held the same intensity she remembered. "I came to warn you," she said, suddenly conscious of how impulsive her journey must appear. "Harlan Tucker threatened me in town. He mentioned you by name, seemed to imply he might seek revenge for what happened 3 years ago." Isaac's expression hardened. "Tucker threatened you? Directly?" He suggested my studio might suffer a fire if I continued associating with you, even in conversation. She straightened her shoulders. I don't respond well to threats, Mr. Blackburn. A fleeting smile touched his lips. So I see. He glanced at her bag. You came all this way just to warn me about Tucker. You saved my life, Violet said simply. I couldn't bear the thought of harm coming to you because of me. Something shifted in Isaac's gaze, a softening, a vulnerability quickly masked. Come inside, he said gruffly. You must be tired from the journey. The cabin was much as she remembered, though small improvements were evident: new curtains on the window, another chair by the fireplace, a bookshelf that hadn't been there before. Isaac moved efficiently around the small space, setting water to boil for coffee, clearing books from the table. How did you get here? He asked as he worked. Not alone, I hope. Señor Martinez brought me as far as the canyon entrance. He's waiting until sunset. Isaac nodded. Juan's a good man, one of the few from town I still trust. He handed her a cup of coffee. You shouldn't have come, Miss Zimmerman, not for my sake. I disagree, Violet replied, meeting his gaze directly. And I think we've moved beyond such formality, don't you? My name is Violet. A long moment passed before he responded. Violet, then. He settled into the chair opposite her. Tucker's threats are nothing new. He and his men avoid these canyons now they know I won't hesitate to defend what's mine. What exactly happened 3 years ago? Violet asked. Tucker mentioned something about a Mexican woman. Isaac's expression darkened. They were using these canyons to smuggle contraband from Mexico, mostly liquor, some weapons. I stumbled upon them while tracking a mountain lion. They had a young woman with them, Maria, Juan's granddaughter. She'd seen them with their cargo in town, and they took her to ensure her silence. His hands tightened around his coffee cup. When I found them, Tucker's partner was hurting her. I killed him. Would have killed Tucker too, but he surrendered. I delivered Maria safely to Juan and warned Tucker and his remaining men that the canyons were off limits to them from then on. The sheriff knows, doesn't he, about the smuggling? Isaac's laugh was bitter. Miller gets a percentage of everything Tucker brings through, so do several prominent citizens of Salida. They weren't pleased when I disrupted their arrangement. That's why you stay away from town. One reason, he acknowledged, though I never much cared for it even before that business. They lapsed into silence, the only sounds the crackling of the fire Isaac had kindled and the wind outside. Violet found herself studying him the way firelight played across his features, softening the hard angles of his face. Whatever walls he maintained against the world seemed slightly lower in her presence now, though still formidable. I should go, she said reluctantly, aware of the fading light outside. Señor Martinez will be waiting. Isaac rose, hesitating before speaking. You could stay. The words seemed torn from him. It's getting late. The trail's dangerous after dark. Their eyes met, and Violet felt the weight of his invitation, its significance beyond mere practicality. Are you sure? No, he admitted, a rare smile tugging at his mouth. But I'm asking anyway, she nodded, unable to suppress her answering smile. Then I accept. The evening unfolded with unexpected ease. Isaac proved to be a capable cook, preparing a rabbit stew that simmered while they talked. Conversation flowed more freely than during their first encounter, ranging from Violet's early success in Salida to books they had both read to memories of life before the war changed everything. My brother would have liked you, Isaac said as they finished their meal. He always said I needed someone who wouldn't let me retreat too far into myself. Tell me more about him, Violet encouraged gently. What was he like? Isaac's expression softened with memory. Daniel was light. Where I was serious, he found humor. Where I saw problems, he saw possibilities. He rose, crossing to a small trunk in the corner. After a moment's hesitation, he returned with a worn leather portfolio. His photographs, Isaac explained, handling the portfolio with reverence. Not the war ones, those were property of the government. These are from after, when we traveled west together. He laid the portfolio on the table between them, carefully opening it to reveal images that took Violet's breath away: stark landscapes, portraits of weathered faces, moments of frontier life captured with extraordinary sensitivity. These are remarkable, she whispered, studying each image with professional appreciation. He had genuine talent. He did, Isaac agreed, pride evident in his voice. These were taken in '72, our last year together. We made it as far as Colorado before he took ill. Violet turned another page and gasped softly. There, staring back at her, was a younger Isaac, less weathered, without the scar, but unmistakably him. In the photograph, he was laughing at something beyond the camera, his expression open and carefree in a way she had never witnessed. "I've never seen you smile like that," she said without thinking. Isaac glanced at the photograph, pain flashing across his features. Not much cause for that kind of smile these days. Impulsively, Violet reached across the table, placing her hand over his. There could be. The contact between them seemed to suspend time itself. Isaac looked down at their joined hands, then up to meet her gaze, vulnerability and longing written plainly across his face. "Violet," he began, his voice rough with emotion, "I'm not the man in that photograph anymore. Haven't been for years. I don't expect you to be," she replied softly. "I care for the man you are now, the one who saved me, who taught me to find my way, who shows kindness despite claiming to prefer isolation." Isaac's hand turned beneath hers, their fingers intertwining. "You've established yourself in Salida, built a life, a business. I can't ask you to give that up." "I'm not giving anything up," Violet countered. "I'm gaining perspective. The truth is, I've thought of you every day since we parted at Wolf Creek Pass. I've hoped you might appear at my studio door. And when Tucker threatened me, my first thought wasn't for my own safety, but for yours." Something broke in Isaac's carefully maintained reserve. He stood, drawing Violet to her feet and into his arms with gentle urgency. One hand cradled her face, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheek as if memorizing it. "I've thought of you too," he admitted, the words barely audible. "More than I should, more than makes any sense for someone I've known so briefly." "Some connections don't require time," Violet whispered, her heart racing as she placed her hand against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. "Only recognition." When Isaac finally lowered his mouth to hers, the kiss was tentative at first, a question rather than a demand. Violet answered by twining her arms around his neck, drawing him closer as the kiss deepened into something that spoke of loneliness ended and belonging found. Later, as they sat before the fire, Violet nestled against Isaac's side, she asked the question that had been forming in her mind. "What if we could find a way to bridge our two worlds? I won't give up my photography, it's who I am. But perhaps Salida isn't the only place I could practice it." Isaac's arm tightened around her shoulders. "What are you suggesting? A compromise? I maintain my studio in town, but split my time between there and here. I've always wanted to document the natural beauty of these canyons, the very landscapes your brother hoped to capture." She turned to face him fully. "And you needn't remain completely isolated. There are good people in Salida, despite Tucker and his ilk. People like Juan Martinez who remember what you did for his granddaughter." Hope and doubt warred in Isaac's expression. "Tucker and his friends won't welcome my presence. Let them object," Violet said fiercely. "I refuse to let criminals dictate how we live our lives. Besides," she added with a smile, "a photographer documents truth. If Tucker and Sheriff Miller are engaged in illegal activities, perhaps the right photographs in the right hands could change the balance of power in Salida." A slow smile spread across Isaac's face, not the carefree grin of the young man in his brother's photograph, but something equally powerful, determination mingled with newfound purpose. "You're proposing we fight back," he said, a hint of admiration in his tone. "I'm proposing we live honestly according to our own principles," Violet corrected. "If that constitutes fighting back, so be it." Isaac cupped her face in his hands, his expression solemn. "It won't be easy, nothing worthwhile ever is. The best photographs require patience and perfect timing," Violet replied, covering his hands with her own. "I'm willing to wait for the right moment if you are." His answer was another kiss deeper this time, filled with promise and possibility. Morning found them planning their future with cautious optimism. Violet would return to Salida to maintain her studio, while Isaac would begin making occasional trips to town, re-establishing connections with those who remembered him favorably. Together, they would document both the town and the wilderness surrounding it, creating a visual record that neither could accomplish alone. "I'll accompany you back to town," Isaac decided as they prepared to leave. "Time I stopped hiding in these canyons and faced Tucker directly." Violet's chest tightened with both pride and concern. "Are you certain?" "No," he admitted with a wry smile, "but some things are worth the risk." The journey to Salida was uneventful, though Violet was acutely aware of Isaac's increasing tension as they approached the town. He had changed from the solitary trapper she'd first encountered, bathed, shaved his beard to a neater style, and donned his least worn clothing, but the wariness in his eyes remained. They reached town by mid-afternoon, drawing curious stares as they rode side by side down Front Street. Isaac's back was straight, his expression neutral, though Violet noticed how his eyes scanned each alleyway and doorway with the habitual vigilance of a man accustomed to danger. At the studio, Isaac helped Violet down from her horse, his hands lingering at her waist. "You're sure about this?" he asked quietly. "Being seen with me won't do your reputation any favors." "I'm sure about you," she replied simply. "The rest will sort itself out." Their entrance into the studio was witnessed by several passers-by, including Mrs. Patterson, the postmaster's wife and one of Salida's most notorious gossips. By evening, the whole town would know that the lady photographer had returned from her mysterious absence in the company of Isaac Blackburn. Violet showed Isaac the studio and her adjoining living quarters, taking pleasure in his genuine interest in her work. He studied her photographs with an artist's eye, offering observations that revealed his brother's influence. "You have a gift for capturing people as they truly are," he commented, examining a portrait of an elderly miner. "No flattery, but no cruelty either, just honest seeing." "The highest compliment you could give me," Violet replied, touched by his understanding. Their quiet moment was interrupted by a sharp knock at the studio door. Isaac tensed, his hand moving instinctively toward the pistol at his hip. "Miss Zimmerman," a voice called. "Are you in there? It's Deputy Rollins." Violet exchanged a glance with Isaac before moving to open the door. The deputy, a lanky young man with an earnest expression, stood on the threshold, looking uncomfortable. "Deputy Rollins," Violet greeted him calmly. "How may I help you?" Rollins' eyes darted past her to Isaac, widening slightly before returning to her face. "Sheriff sent me to check on you, madam. Said you'd been gone and might be in difficulty." "As you can see, I'm perfectly fine," Violet replied. "Mr. Blackburn and I have been documenting some of the canyon landscapes for a photography project." The deputy shifted uneasily. "Sheriff asked me to inform you that he'd like a word, if convenient. You as well, Mr. Blackburn." Isaac stepped forward, his expression composed. "We'll be along shortly, deputy. Thank you for the message." After Rollins departed, Violet turned to Isaac with concern. "This is Miller's way of warning us. He'll have heard from Mrs. Patterson by now that you're back in town." "Let him warn," Isaac said with quiet resolve. "I'm done hiding from men like Miller and Tucker." They walked to the sheriff's office together, Isaac's hand occasionally brushing Violet's in a gesture of reassurance. The sheriff's scowl when they entered spoke volumes. "Well, well," Miller said, leaning back in his chair. "The hermit returns to civilization." "Can't say it's a welcome sight, Blackburn. Didn't come for your welcome, Miller." Isaac's tone was even. "Just passing through." With Miss Zimmerman, the sheriff's gaze shifted to Violet, his disapproval evident. "Interesting choice of company for a lady of your standing." "Mr. Blackburn has been kind enough to assist me with my photographic endeavors," Violet replied coolly. "The canyons contain remarkable landscapes that I intend to document." Miller snorted. "Is that what they're calling it these days, photographic endeavors?" Isaac took a step forward, his patience visibly thinning. "You wanted to see us, Sheriff. State your business." "My business is keeping order in this town," Miller snapped, "which includes warning newcomers about associating with known troublemakers." "The only trouble I ever caused was interfering with Tucker's smuggling operation," Isaac countered. "The same operation you protect in exchange for a cut of the profits." Miller's face reddened. "That's a serious accusation, Blackburn. One I could have you jailed for. On what charge?" Violet interjected. "Speaking the truth isn't a crime, Sheriff." "Don't push me, Miss Zimmerman." Miller rose, his bulk imposing behind the desk. Your fancy Eastern ways don't impress me. This is my town, and I decide who's welcome here. Actually, came a new voice from the doorway, I believe the citizens decide that. They turned to find Judge Hammond standing in the entrance, a distinguished man in his 60s whose circuit court served several counties in the region. He stepped into the office, nodding politely to Violet before fixing Miller with a stern gaze. Judge Hammond, the sheriff stammered, his demeanor instantly changing, didn't expect you until next week's session. Evidently, the judge replied dryly. I arrived early and happened to overhear part of this conversation. Perhaps you'd care to elaborate on this smuggling operation Mr. Blackburn mentioned. Miller's face paled. Just a misunderstanding, Your Honor. Blackburn here has a grudge against Harlan Tucker, imagines all sorts of things. I imagine nothing, Isaac said firmly. 3 years ago, I interrupted Tucker and his men smuggling liquor and weapons through Whitewood Canyon. They had abducted Maria Martinez to keep her from reporting what she'd seen. When I found them, Tucker's partner was assaulting her. I killed him in her defense and brought her safely to her grandfather. The judge's expression remained impassive, but his eyes sharpened. Serious allegations, Mr. Blackburn. Do you have evidence? Maria's testimony, her grandfather's as well, and this. Isaac reached slowly into his coat, withdrawing a folded paper that he handed to the judge. List of dates, locations, and cargo that I've documented over the past 3 years. Every time Tucker's men have attempted to use the canyons, I've noted it. Hammond unfolded the paper, scanning its contents with growing interest. This is quite detailed, Mr. Blackburn. Why haven't you brought this forward before now? Isaac glanced at Miller, who was now sweating visibly. Would it have mattered? The sheriff here has made his position clear. It matters now, Hammond said decisively. I've received complaints from several ranchers about missing cattle and suspicious travelers. This may connect to those reports. He refolded the paper, tucking it into his own coat. I'll want formal statements from both you and the Martinez family, Mr. Blackburn. And you, Miss Zimmerman, I understand you're a photographer. Yes, Your Honor. I may require your professional services to document certain locations Mr. Blackburn has identified. The judge turned to Miller, whose bluster had completely evaporated. In the meantime, Sheriff, I suggest you reconsider your associations. The territorial governor takes a dim view of law enforcement officials involved in smuggling operations. Miller sank back into his chair, defeat written across his features. Now see here, Judge. No, you see here, Hammond interrupted firmly. This territory is working toward statehood. We cannot afford lawlessness from those sworn to uphold the law. Consider yourself under observation, Sheriff Miller. With that, the judge nodded to Isaac and Violet, gesturing for them to precede him out of the office. Once outside, Hammond's stern expression softened slightly. I've been hoping to find evidence against Tucker for some time, he admitted. His operation extends beyond these canyons, affecting several communities under my jurisdiction. Your documentation may be the key to dismantling it entirely, Mr. Blackburn. Happy to provide whatever assistance I can, Your Honor, Isaac replied. Though I should warn you, Tucker won't surrender his profitable business without a fight. Few criminals do, Hammond agreed grimly. Which is why I'll be requesting additional federal marshals before proceeding. In the meantime, I suggest both of you exercise caution. Tucker will have heard of your return by now, Mr. Blackburn. After the judge departed, Violet turned to Isaac, hope mingling with concern in her expression. This changes everything, doesn't it? It might, Isaac acknowledged, taking her hand as they walked back toward the studio. If Hammond follows through, he has a reputation for honesty, but one honest judge against an entrenched network of corruption. He shrugged. We'll see. Either way, we face this together now, Violet said firmly. Isaac's expression softened as he looked down at her. Together, he agreed, the word carrying weight beyond its simple meaning. The confrontation with Tucker came sooner than either expected. That evening, as they shared a quiet meal in Violet's quarters behind the studio, the sound of breaking glass shattered the peace. Isaac was on his feet instantly, extinguishing the lamp and moving to the window. Tucker, he said grimly, gesturing for Violet to stay back, and 4 others. They've broken the studio window. Violet's heart pounded as she heard heavy boots crunching over broken glass in the darkened studio. What do we do? Get out the back way, Isaac instructed, checking his pistol. Go to Judge Hammond at the hotel, I'll hold them here. I'm not leaving you, Violet protested. Isaac gripped her shoulders, his expression fierce in the dim light from the fireplace. This isn't the time for debate, Violet. Tucker means to kill me and probably you too. I need to know you're safe. Before she could argue further, the door connecting the studio to the living quarters splintered under a heavy blow. Isaac pushed Violet toward the back door, then turned to face the intruders, his stance wide and balanced, pistol raised. That's far enough, Tucker, he called as a shadowy figure appeared in the broken doorway. Blackburn, Tucker's voice held vicious pleasure. Figured you'd be here. Time to finish what we started 3 years ago. Judge Hammond has my evidence, Isaac replied steadily. Killing me won't stop what's coming for you and your operation. Tucker laughed, the sound chilling in its confidence. Hammond will be gone in a week. We'll be here. Town belongs to us, always has. Not anymore, came Violet's voice from behind Isaac. She had not fled as instructed but had positioned herself near the fireplace, where the dying embers cast just enough light to illuminate the scene. Isaac felt a mixture of frustration and pride at her defiance. Violet, go now. Listen to your man, lady, Tucker sneered, raising his own pistol. This don't concern you. It concerns me directly, Violet replied, her voice remarkably steady despite the danger. This is my home, my business you've vandalized. And Mr. Blackburn is under my protection as much as I am under his. Tucker's face twisted with contempt. Ain't that touching? The hermit found himself a woman who don't know when to shut her mouth. He stepped fully into the room, flanked by 2 of his men. Guess we'll have to teach both of you a lesson. What happened next occurred with such speed that later, Violet could never quite reconstruct the sequence of events. Tucker raised his gun toward Isaac. Isaac fired first, his bullet striking Tucker's shoulder. One of Tucker's men lunged for Violet, who swung the heavy iron poker from the fireplace with unexpected strength, connecting solidly with his temple. The third man fired wildly, his shot splintering the wooden beam above Isaac's head. Isaac's second shot dropped him where he stood. Tucker, wounded but still dangerous, staggered backward toward the studio, shouting for his remaining men. Isaac advanced, his focus absolute. It ends now, Tucker. Drop your weapon. Instead, Tucker aimed again, his face contorted with hate. The report of his pistol was deafening in the confined space, but the bullet went wide as another shot rang out from the direction of the broken studio window. Tucker crumpled, blood blooming across his chest. In the doorway to the studio stood Deputy Rollins, his smoking pistol still raised. Behind him, several townsmen peered into the darkened room, lanterns casting long shadows. Heard the commotion, Rollins explained, his young face pale but determined. Saw Tucker and his men breaking in. I tried to fetch the sheriff, but he wasn't in his office. The deputy's expression hardened. Convenient that. Isaac lowered his weapon slowly, moving to Violet's side. You all right? She nodded, though her hands trembled as she set down the poker. Yes, thanks to Deputy Rollins' timely arrival, the aftermath unfolded with surprising speed. Judge Hammond took charge of the investigation, temporarily relieving Sheriff Miller of duty when it became clear he had deliberately absented himself during the attack. Tucker died of his wounds before morning, but 2 of his men survived to face the judge's questioning. Under Hammond's authorization, Violet photographed the scene of the attack, creating visual evidence of Tucker's assault. Isaac provided his detailed records of the smuggling operation, which the surviving members of Tucker's gang corroborated in exchange for leniency. Within a week, federal marshals had arrived to assist with dismantling the smuggling network. Sheriff Miller was arrested for his complicity, along with 2 prominent businessmen who had financed the operation. Deputy Rollins was appointed acting sheriff, a position the young man accepted with both pride and trepidation. Through it all, Isaac remained at Violet's side, helping to repair the damaged studio and standing firm against the last whispers of gossip from those who had benefited from Tucker's illicit trade. Their relationship, forged in crisis and deepened by shared purpose, became the subject of cautious approval rather than scandal as the truth about Tucker's operation became widely known. On a clear autumn day, 6 months after their fateful meeting in the canyon, Isaac and Violet stood together on the porch of his cabin, now their cabin, at least part of the time. Violet had maintained her studio in town, but spent increasing amounts of time in the canyon, documenting its beauty just as Daniel Blackburn had once hoped to do. Martinez delivered the last of the prints to Judge Hammond yesterday, Violet said, leaning against the porch railing. He said they were the final evidence needed for the territorial governor's report. Isaac nodded, his arms slipping around her waist. Hammond mentioned statehood might come sooner rather than later, Colorado's changing. For the better, I think, Violet replied, turning in his embrace to face him. Though I hope these canyons never change too much, they have a magic all their own. They brought me you, Isaac said softly, the words still coming with effort from a man unaccustomed to expressing emotion. That's magic enough for me. Violet reached up to trace the scar on his face, a gesture that had become familiar and beloved. Do you ever regret it? Leaving your solitude behind? Isaac considered the question seriously, as he did all things. I regret the circumstances, Tucker's attack, the danger you faced. But this, he gestured between them, then to the cabin they now shared. No regrets, not a single one. The kiss they shared was tender, a reaffirmation of the connection that had formed when a reclusive cowboy found her lost in the canyon, and she discovered the way back to his heart. Later that evening, as they sat before the fire in the cabin that no longer felt lonely, Isaac reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object wrapped in faded blue cloth. I've been carrying this for weeks, he admitted, unfolding the cloth to reveal a simple gold ring set with a small pearl. It was my mother's. Daniel kept it after she died, and when he passed, it came to me. He looked up, meeting Violet's gaze with uncharacteristic vulnerability. I never thought I'd have cause to give it to anyone, never thought I'd want to. Violet's breath caught as he took her hand, his own remarkably steady. I'm not good with fancy words, Isaac continued, but I love you, Violet Zimmerman. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Tears sprang to Violet's eyes as she nodded. Yes, she whispered. 1,000 times yes. As Isaac slipped the ring onto her finger, Violet thought of the twisted path that had led her here from Philadelphia to the canyons, from fear to love. She had come west seeking a new beginning, never imagining she would find it in the arms of a man who had similarly been searching, though he hadn't known it. What are you thinking? Isaac asked, drawing her close. That sometimes being lost is the only way to be found, Violet replied, resting her head against his chest. And that love, like photography, is about seeing clearly what others might miss. Isaac's soft laughter rumbled beneath her ear, a sound that had become more frequent in recent months, as if joy were a forgotten skill slowly remembered. My philosophical bride-to-be. Your bride, Violet agreed, lifting her face for his kiss. In every canyon and valley, through every storm and sunbreak, for all the days to come. And in the years that followed through the birth of their children, the growth of Violet's photography business, the gradual healing of Isaac's war-worn spirit, they kept that promise. Their love, born in the wilderness and tempered by adversity, became as enduring as the ancient canyons themselves, weathered by time but only made more beautiful by the passage of years.